We have, first we have Professor Shobha Barur. Next slide, please. Dr. Shobha Barur was a professor at All India Institute of Medical Sciences. She retired. She is now Emeritus Professor of SGT Medical College, Gurgaon. Besides being an MD microbiology, she has FAMS. She has 38 years of experience in microbiology, having served in PGI Chandigarh, AIMS, in various capacities. She's won a number of awards, H.I. Jhala Award, Lifetime Achievement Award, Dr. Srinivas Oration Award, S.C. Agarwal Oration Award, J.B. Srivastava Oration, Boots Oration, and today she will speak about dengue virus. Dr. Shobha Barur, please. Next slide, please.
Good evening, everybody. So today I'm going to introduce dengue virus and its pathogenesis. Dr. Shukratan has already told, but dengue is a mosquito-borne acute febrile illness and is a major public health problem mainly in the tropics and subtropics. About more than 100 countries are in the endemic region for dengue, and 3.6 billion people, or more than 40% of the world's population, resides in dengue endemic areas. It is estimated that each year about 400 million people are affected with dengue virus. They get infection, 100 million become ill, and 21,000 deaths are attributed to dengue. Next slide. Dengue viruses belong to the family Flaviviridae, genus Flavivirus. They are enveloped viruses. They have a single-stranded positive sense RNA genome of about 11,000 base pairs. The envelope has the fusion protein and the envelope protein, and inside the envelope is the matrix protein. This is the viral RNA and nucleocapsid. There are 4 serotypes of dengue: dengue 1, 2, 3, and 4. Next slide. The genome of the virus is about 11,000 or 11 kb in size. It codes for structural and non-structural proteins. It's a single-stranded positive sense RNA with a single ORF, which encodes for a polyprotein. ORF is an open reading frame. This polyprotein consists of about 3,400 amino acid residues. This polyprotein is then cleaved by various proteolytic enzymes of the host and the virus into structural and non-structural proteins. The structural proteins are the capsid proteins, the pre-membrane protein, and the envelope protein. And the non-structural proteins are 5, that is NS1, NS2, which is further cleaved into NS2A and 2B, NS3, NS4, which is further cleaved into A and B, and NS5. Next slide. These genes code for the following proteins. The C codes for the capsid protein, the pre-M codes for the pre-membrane protein, the envelope protein, and then NS1, 2A, 2B, NS3. So NS1 is involved in the replication and in the immune modulation of the virus. NS2A is again involved in the replication and the virion assembly. NS3 is a protease and a helicase. NS4B is also a protein interaction and helps in replication. 4A helps in membrane rearrangement. And then NS5 is an RNA-dependent RNA polymerase and a methyl transferase, which is needed for virus replication. Next slide. This is a cartoon of the viral replication. Next slide. The virus enters the host cell by binding to the host cell receptor via the E protein or the envelope protein. It enters the cell via the receptor-mediated endocytosis and forms an endosome inside the host cell. The acidic environment in the endosome triggers the fusion of the viral envelope with the endosomal membrane. The viral nucleocapsid gets released into the cytoplasm. the uncoating occurs and the viral RNA is released. The viral RNA is then translated and polyprotein processing occurs. The viral RNA, being a positive sense RNA, itself acts as a messenger RNA. It is translated into a single polyprotein, which is then cleaved into individual proteins by viral and host proteases. Now, the non-structural proteins help in the replication of the viral RNA. First, from the positive sense RNA, a negative sense RNA is formed. And then from the negative sense RNA, by using the RNA-dependent RNA polymerase, multiple positive sense copies are made, which occur in replication complexes on rough endoplasmic reticulum. The viral assembly and maturation then occurs once the RNA is formed. The C proteins or the capsular proteins encapsulate the new RNA and form the nucleocapsid. The envelope is made by the ER membrane, and the E and M proteins, they go and embed into the ER membrane. This forms the immature virion. The maturity of the virion occurs in the Golgi apparatus via the pre-M cleavage by the furin enzyme. The mature virions are released and first transported into vesicles and then are released by exocytosis or budding into the environment, and they are ready to infect other cells. And the same has been shown earlier in the uh, picture that I had shown. Now, dengue viruses, as I told you, have 4 serotypes. Each serotype provides specific lifetime immunity and short-term cross-immunity. Short-term cross-immunity only lasts for a few weeks or months. Only transient and weak cross-protection occurs among the 4 serotypes. Although it is said that some serotypes cause more severe disease, but basically all serotypes can cause severe and fatal disease. Each serotype is further divided into genotypes based on genetic variation, and some genetic variants within each serotype are more virulent or have a greater epidemic potential. Next slide. I will not dwell in this into too much because I think Dr. Ekta has a slide on this, but just to tell you that dengue 1, 2, and 3 each have 5 genotypes and dengue 4 has 4 genotypes. And epidemiological analysis suggests that different genotypes differ in their epidemic potential and virulence. Next slide. Now, what is the immune response to dengue? In primary infection, soon after dengue infection, B cells get activated and they produce type-specific IgM antibodies. Later, some B cells start producing IgG and even IgA and IgE antibodies, and some go on to form the memory cells, which gives us the long-term immunity. Next. Whereas in secondary dengue infection, when you get infection with another dengue serotype, if the infection occurs with the same serotype, then memory B cells recognize it, divide, and produce new B cells, which make homotypic IgG antibodies and neutralize the virus and eliminate it. If the second infection is with a different serotype, then heterotypic antibodies or cross-reactive antibodies are produced to cross-reactive antigens. This process is also called original antigenic sin, and students who read about influenza should know what is original antigenic sin. The virgin B cells also produce homotypic antibodies to the infecting dengue serotype. Next. The transmission of dengue virus primarily occurs from person to person through the bite of an infected Aedes aegypti or sometimes Aedes albopictus mosquitoes. Humans are the primary host and the source of virus for the female mosquitoes to acquire dengue virus through a blood meal from viremic humans. Mosquitoes become infective after an intrinsic incubation period of 8 to 12 days and transmit the dengue virus for the rest of their 1 month lifespan. Infection with dengue virus results in a high titer viremia of approximately 7 days. Therefore, rarely bloodborne transmission is possible through exposure of infected blood, organs, or other tissues, such as bone marrow, during this period, and rarely perinatal transmission from a mother who's having an acute dengue infection has also been documented. Next, Aedes aegypti mosquito is a, I've shown it here, is a big mosquito with black spots on its wings. Dengue is transmitted by the infected female mosquito. It's a daytime feeder. It lives around human habitations, rests in dark areas like linen closets and under beds, and breeds in many such containers, artificial containers, which have water in them, like bromeliads, tree holes, artificial containers, and septic tanks. So here are some pictures of the containers. The transmission of dengue virus by Aedes aegypti occurs through these two cycles. The mosquito feeds the human beings, acquires the virus, and the virus multiplies in the mosquito gut. This is, human beings are having viremia and the mosquito feeds them. And this period of extrinsic incubation period is about 8 to 12 days. This mosquito, once after 8 to 12 days, the virus is multiplied and has gone into the salivary glands. It refeeds and transmits the virus, and the human beings get the infection. And the intrinsic incubation period in the human beings is about 3 to 14 days. Next. So the virus is transmitted by this mosquito through their saliva when they bite. It replicates in the target organs like the lymph glands and the macrophages. It infects the blood cells and the lymphatic tissues and is released into the blood and produces viremia. Then a second mosquito ingests the virus with the blood, and the virus replicates in the mosquito midgut and other organs and infects salivary glands. Next. The WHO has classified the dengue virus severity recently in 2009 like this. I think I know this is being taken by somebody else, but this is just to tell you when we talk about the pathogenicity. The dengue virus infections can be asymptomatic or symptomatic. About 30% infections are asymptomatic. Symptomatic infections can be an undifferentiated fever, a typical dengue fever, or a severe dengue. A dengue fever can have no warning signs or can have warning signs. I'm sure somebody is going to talk about them. And severe dengue can have severe plasma leakage, severe bleed, or organs are severely impaired. Next. The risk factors which have been reported for dengue hemorrhagic fever or severe dengue include virus strain or genotype, virus serotype. It is said that dengue virus 2 followed by 3, 4, and 1 are the, according to the severity or the potential to cause dengue hemorrhagic fever. Pre-existing anti-dengue antibodies, I told you that secondary infections can occur because there's no permanent immunity with the same, only with to the same serotype. To the heterologous serotypes, there's only partial immunity. And also in infants who are born to mothers with dengue antibodies, there is previously antibodies present in the blood which can cause severe dengue. The host genetics, the age of the host can also be high risks for development of dengue hemorrhagic fever, high risk in secondary infections, and high risk in locations where more than two serotypes are circulating simultaneously at high levels, which is called hyperendemic transmission. Next. So this is what happens when a secondary dengue infection occurs. If the secondary infection is with the same dengue serotype, due to the protective immunity, the virus is eliminated. But if the secondary dengue infection occurs due to another serotype, Then these heterotypic non-neutralizing antibodies bind to the non-FC receptor and virus enters the cell through these FC receptors. There is increased viral replication and this leads to disease progression. Next, the various factors which are involved in the production of dengue hemorrhagic fever. The most important of this is the antibody dependent enhancement, which we were just now talking, that the heterologous antibodies form infectious complexes with the dengue virus. These infectious complexes are these antibodies being non-neutralizing enter the host cells and they replicate at a higher level in the mononuclear cells. These infected monocytes then release various vasoactive mediators and which lead to increased vascular permeability and hemorrhagic manifestations that characterized dengue hemorrhagic fever and dengue shock syndrome. Next. There have been many studies on cytokine dysregulation in dengue, and I am not going into details of this, but some of the cytokines, which are the pro inflammatory type 1 cytokines, have been found to be increased in dengue, and they can also be considered as prognostic markers for disease severity. These include interferon gamma, TNF alpha, IL-6, IL-8, IL-2, RANTES, IL-1, and so on. Higher plasma levels of some other cytokines have also been reported with severe dengue infections. But there are so many studies on cytokines that it is difficult to form, consensus opinion of which cytokines are important in dengue. Next. There are some other soluble factors which have also been found in high levels in dengue and DSS, which include vascular endothelial growth factor, granulocyte macrophage colony stimulating factor, and so on and so forth. And again, all these are single studies or 2 or 3 studies on each of these factors. Next. There is also role of NS1 antigen in severity of dengue. Antibodies against NS1 induce endothelial cell damage and subsequent apoptosis. The NS1 antigen stimulates human endothelial cells via induction of MIF or migration inhibitory factor. This enhances the secretion of two enzymes, heparinases and metalloproteinase 9, which result in endothelial glycocalyx degradation and hyperpermeability. NS1 also is important for complement activation. When NS1 binds to the antibodies, which can be the heterotypic antibodies, that complement activation occurs. Anti-NSN antibodies can also enhance expression of interleukin 6 and IL-8 and intracellular adhesion molecule. Binding of dengue NS1 to TLR4 on platelets can trigger activation of platelets, which get aggregated, attached to the endothelium, as well as get phagocytized by macrophages, subsequently leading to thrombocytopenia and hemorrhage. Next. So, the production of dengue hemorrhagic fever or severe dengue is a multifactorial process which involves epidemiological factors, virus risk factors, human risk factors, and eco factors or ecology factors. So, all these combine, and seasonal distribution and climatic factors. So, all these combine, and sometimes we get dengue hemorrhagic fever or dengue shock syndrome.
Thank you very much, ma'am.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for explaining the virus as well as the pathogenesis. And I hope now everybody understands how the secondary infection can be more dangerous than the primary one.